Okay, welcome to another edition of Expand News Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Ivan and April from eVenturing. We've spent a lot of time together over the past 2 weeks, which has been ace, although the relationship's been quite short. I feel like I know you both very well now. So welcome. As a kick-off, I would like, if you may, just to do a bit of an intro into eVenturing, introduce yourselves, and then we're going to talk about international expansion, right?
Yeah,
sure.
Things
Good
IE.
stuff.
Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ivan and I work at eVenturing, which is an Amazon accelerator. We were founded in
18 that we were.
2018, and basically over the course of time, as the Amazon platform has changed, our offering has changed with that. And my core focus, so I head up the international expansion and delivery team. So primarily working with large US brands which are looking to launch into the UK and Europe and don't necessarily have the bandwidth or the knowledge to navigate the complexities of VAT requirements and product compliance.
Nice.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'm April, so I'm the sales manager here at eVenturing, and I also plug directly into what Ivan does. So basically, once businesses decide that they want to expand and come over to the UK and EU, that plugs directly into Ivan's team. So basically, I'm the first port of call for those who are wanting to expand. But yeah, as Ivan was saying, since eVenturing's been operating since around 2018, and we really kind of came to be. So our CEO and founder, Sam Baldwin, he came out of finance to join his brother working in an Amazon business. Basically, throughout that time, so from there, we started working in the business. Yeah, in 2018, we've been operating in the Amazon space since then. And at the time, there was a lot of capital coming into the market, kind of liquid capital to come in during COVID, where a lot of, kind of big C-suites and private equity firms wanting to come in and start purchasing e-commerce businesses, which was a really interesting time. They raised somewhere around, $16 billion to come in and basically purchase these businesses. But where we kind of ended up sitting in the fold is that, you had a lot of, as we said, C-suites coming in that didn't have a lot of experience around kind of e-commerce businesses, kind of how to acquire those. And so where Amazon kind of grew to and where, founders and co-founders kind of took the thing at the time was that, we used to sit in between, that kind of investment and the actual e-commerce founders and kind of, in between them learning off each other. And so we'd end up spending time with businesses in the between, 6 to 36 months and growing and scaling them from there. And that's kind of, at the end of that, we realized we had an awesome playbook of how to grow businesses on Amazon and kind of get them to where they need to be and scale and exit. And then so from there, we kind of got our Amazon Growth Accelerator Program, and then we kind of went, wow, why don't we send this, look to turn internationally about, so many businesses that we talk to want to come to the UK and EU, and we know how to unlock, launch, and kind of grow the business from there. It's kind of how we came to be and how we are today. So no, it's great to be here.
I think the key word in that I pick up on is the accelerator part, because a lot of service providers, claim that they can support a brand get to a point of exit or get to a point of significant growth. But what I find interesting about eVenturing is the fact that you do that whole piece. So you support them with growing into new regions, you support them with all of the bits in between, like the VAT and the product compliance, which we'll talk about in a minute. But then you get them actually ready as a business, not just in their domestic region, but internationally, in order to get the most bang for their business, I suppose, at the end of it, right? Which is the end goal for most e-commerce brands, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's important to have an exit strategy. Ultimately, the founders or businesses we work with, there's going to come a time and point in their life where whether they believe they've hit the market ceiling or are at a time in their life where they're quite happy to sell the business and move on to a new venture. We recognize that was important, and especially when what April alluded to in 2018 to say 2020, 2021, where there was COVID and the e-commerce boom, it was far easier to achieve an exit in the space compared to now. And I think over time we've recognized what are the KPIs and the metrics the buy side are looking for. So we have a sister company called Chapter International, headed up by eVenturing's co-founder Alex, and their primary role within the company is everything M&A focused. So looking at the businesses we've grown and scaled to a point, and then helping them achieve an exit in the space.
So, interesting you said about the exiting piece, and we know that boom that they had with the aggregators, and multiples of 10 and sometimes even more in businesses, and the pickle that got all them in, for a polite way of putting it.
Yeah.
So, do you find that with brands now that they expect those same multiples, or are they a bit more cautious of who they're dealing with in that space? What does that look like for you?
Typically much more cautious. I think ultimately the businesses that are in a position now to sell have typically been within the Amazon and e-commerce space for a while. We're probably having offers by aggregators back then, and recognise that now the multiples are nowhere near what they were at that time. So they're very much more switched on with it. And ultimately, I think that's why they look to try diversify both from a marketplace perspective, so not just in the US, having the UK and EU as well to diversify their landed costs with everything going on with the Trump tariffs. And then also overall brand building and building the brand equity side of things. So well-established name in the US, trying to get a foothold in the UK and EU, along with potentially a launch into retail brick and mortar, which ultimately helps with the multiplier.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, we've been in the business long enough that we've been able to recognize the trends and the kind of changes and adapt to that. And understand, what we need, as Ivan was saying, like what these aggregators are looking for, or what these kind of future partners are looking for, or what our founders need, and kind of what their goals are as well. And that to kind of understand, what it takes to grow and sell a business is kind of where we've ended up. So, yeah.
Excellent. Good. Well, like I say, thanks for that intro. We segued a little bit into a bit about the aggregators. It's an interesting subject. But so we're going to touch on the Accelerator piece today, a little bit about what it takes to expand their brand and eventually get to the point of exit. But before we do that, we spoke about our relationship earlier. We've known each other now as businesses for not long at all. However, we had the pleasure of spending a lot of time together at Amazon Accelerate in Seattle this year. So I wanted to touch on that because I've done it a few times now. It's a fantastic event and a great opportunity to meet some awesome Amazon sellers and Amazonians themselves. So how did you find it? What did you think?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was so cool. Just like the scale, like the event itself, world class. Don't think we'll ever go to another trade show like that. Well, it's a pretty high bar to start off in terms of going to the States. My first time in the States, so it was pretty awesome. It was just extreme. It was awesome. But I think in terms of what we got out of it, we had some things we wanted to achieve. Mainly, we came over to, as you said, just kind of like, build our relationship with you guys. And I think we definitely achieved that. What happens on tour stays on tour, as they say. But no, outside of that, I think we did come back with a lot, been really busy. We had a lot of really positive conversations around businesses that want to expand into the UK and EU. I think between our two offerings in terms of what we're trying to achieve, your guys on the unlock side, ours on that growth, kind of understanding the research element behind the unlock as well, and kind of why people should scale into those markets. There's a lot of appetite out there, and I think also we had quite a debrief afterwards. Is that was really an interesting exercise of where we kind of sit within the Amazon space and kind of, what our service offering is. And I think, between the two of us as a partnership, but also like wider outside of that, didn't really come across anybody that was kind of doing what we did. So it was good to
there was that as well.
Benchmark ourselves on kind of like that world stage, kind of outside of the UK and EU, but also interesting to see kind of, opportunities for us to learn and improve, talking to so many different service offerings. And so there was a lot of takeaways, in terms of people wanting to do business, but also in terms of operationally, where are we in the whole space of the, the ecosystem, but what can we improve on?
It's a good all-encompassing event, isn't it?
Yeah.
For all of those understandings. So I'm glad it was valuable for everyone who attended board accounts.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, let's get back to it. So in terms of eVenturing's ideal client, really, like what does the e-commerce brand that you typically work with look like?
I'd say we're category agnostic. And then in terms of revenue benchmarking, obviously that is important, but ultimately depending on the client's objectives, and what I mean by that is I could say that you could be doing potentially $500,000 per year in the US, and with the right partnership in terms of the service offering that Expandly provide and the growth opportunity that we see in the UK and EU, even as low as $500,000, there's a rationale and a really good market opportunity to launch your brand in the UK and Europe. Equally, the larger brands which are well established have a very high review count and maybe don't necessarily have the time and bandwidth to focus on international markets because they are so busy with their core marketplace, which is doing so well, probably from both an Amazon lens and also a Shopify lens. That those are probably ones which are an ideal candidate in a sense that we can be as an agency as hands-on, as proactive as necessary to basically work with the likes of Expandly to get to get this business live in the UK and Europe within 4 months of signing.
Yeah, I think also, at the end of the day, as Ivan said, is that it is a case by case basis in the fact that we are category agnostic. Depends on where every company is at in their journey, and also, for us at the end of the day, that's why for us it's that in terms of our model, it's that market research, so understanding why a company should be coming into the UK and EU, understanding what the revenue potential is, what the competitor landscape looks like. Like that is different for every company. And so, between that ends of the scale is what I was saying, that 500K revenue of, they've just been building their brand over the last few years on Amazon, wanting to expanding on launch. What's the opportunity? It could be a brand that there's actually the category is underserved on our side of the UK, EU. So this could be perfect time for them to launch because we go, hey, this is there's a big opportunity here, and also up through to those kind of wider companies, that those larger scale companies that when they come in, they are going to do well, because traditionally businesses that come from the States in particular come in, although the market might be smaller, the revenue potential is higher because they might be coming in with a higher threshold of reviews, etc. So it's very much so understanding why they should launch and then going to the unlock, which is obviously what you guys do, and then the launch from there. So in a roundabout way.
No, it's fine. I mean, I understand. I mean, it's very difficult to pinpoint what makes a business successful specifically, because there isn't 3 metrics or 4, even 5 metrics that we would say, well, if you hit these thresholds, you're going to do well. I mean, there's so many other variables to it. So I understand that, but category specific, you're agnostic with that. What about D2C, vendor model? Like, what's your speciality in that space, or do you have one? Is it specifically Amazon, or do you work with other marketplaces?
Specifically Amazon, but within the Amazon, there are other offerings that we have outside of the international expansion. So we have the distributor model, where essentially through the power of Amazon's brand registry and IP and trademarks, we can reach out to distributors and say, hey, look, at the moment, your product is being sold on Amazon by multiple of the distributors you sell to, and ultimately it's a race to the bottom line to win the buy box. Let us come in, reclaim your products, manage them on your behalf, cut out the middleman, and essentially you achieve a higher profit margin on every sale you make, because it's not a race to the bottom through the resellers. That's one of them.
Yeah, and then we've also got, vendor management as well. Is that, we have a team, one of our portfolio, like our main kind of teams in eVenturing, is that they specialize in vendor relationship management. So whether it's, you are, you're a big company and you're managing a relationship directly with Amazon, we can kind of come in and help you, do the negotiations / just kind of work with them on day-to-day, that kind of wider catalog management. And also kind of understanding what your profitability kind of what that looks like. And also that is one thing that we really pride ourselves on at eVenturing, is that we are very financially prudent, and we have a reputation for being really honing in on, that kind of margin, growing that margin at the end of the day. Because, when you're unlocking these markets, you want to scale, but it's also going to be sustainable growth. So in the vendor space, that wider catalog management, but also say you've been with Amazon on vendor for X amount of years, and you're actually wanting to transition some of your catalog onto FBA. We understand, we can go through and do that kind of financial analysis of what is your most profitable route to market or route through Amazon, basically. So vendor, FBM, FBA, we do all that analysis as well. Basically the whole spectrum. But
Okay, nice. In terms of, we spoke about there's not just a few things that make a brand right for expansion or moving into other markets, but what do you assess in the brand to understand whether they are right or ready for, not right, it's the wrong word, but they're ready for international expansion? Is there certain things that have to be in place before you even recommend that they consider it?
Yeah, so I was actually talking to April on the train down here about this because we do speak with brands where, with any brand that eVenturing has a discussion with April and the team, will do an opportunity assessment to ensure that the partnership makes sense, not only for us, but them as a brand. And I think a large piece of whether a brand is ready or not is, are they well established and have systems already in place in the US, or sorry, whatever their core marketplace is. And I think that's important because you can spread yourself too thin with these global expansions. So a big thing is having a sense of stability in your home market with processes in place, a good relationship with your supplier, so that there is both time availability from the person operating the business in the home market to dedicate towards making sure that the international expansion goes successfully. And then the second piece of that is, when we do the market opportunity assessment, we can get good visibility into what is the demand for the brand's product in this international market. And if we perform the analysis and find that there isn't necessarily a market opportunity there, then we will let the client know that, because not every product in one marketplace, so the consumer's taste and preference is the same in another.
Sure.
And we have had examples of that in the past.
Yeah, so no, just to follow on from Ivan's point, is that, basically making sure that brands are, they've really, consolidated what's been happening in their home market, because our approach is about that layered, that structured approach to international expansion. Is once you've got one marketplace right, layering on the next one in turn to kind of have that international exposure. And, for example, a lot of people, as you guys will know, when they come over to the UK and EU, particularly on the EU side, a lot of people don't necessarily understand how the makeup of the EU, but how the German shop is very different to the Spanish and to the Brits, and it's the same with Italy, France, and the likes. And so it's about understanding what's happening in each of those markets and doing them in a staged approach to make sure that you get the maximum, the most opportunity out of each one. And so that's kind of what the approach is, that making sure that we know that works in the home market, and then kind of launching from there on that localized perspective. So
sure.
I have one more thing to add there. In terms of barriers, some brands might not necessarily know the product compliance requirements for some of these international markets, and I appreciate that sometimes a product compliance provider will need to do a label review, but we've been working with multiple brands for coming up 9 years now. So we have a pretty good indication as to what products are compliant or can be made compliant in international markets. And secondly, some products where we know that there's a lot of red tape that needs to be completed in order to sell there. So certain classes of medical devices, hazmat goods that require separate storage, and also freight forwarding and logistics considerations. So all of these things we try to inform a brand from the get-go, so that they go into the partnership with their eyes wide open and an understanding of not only the risks, but I'd say the additional cost implications that come with launching some of these products.
At the end of the day, we're after, for us, it's about making sure all the enabling conditions are in place, because we're looking for long-term partnerships. Sure. And so, that initial kind of...
No surprises.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an awesome opportunity, especially from our perspective. We go, this is going to be absolutely smash it over this side of the Atlantic, and, be excited about championing their brand from over here. But it is, as you say, building that trust from the get-go. You don't want there to be any surprises. So,
And there's a couple of things you mentioned there that I want to pick up on when we're talking about the readiness of a brand. So turn the clock back 3 years ago, the market, in my opinion, people I spoke to was all around, you need to have liquidity to be able to expand, you need to have spare cash, you need to be able to afford it, you need to be able to buy all your stock and all of that sort of jazz. And that was the number one thing to expand. Are you financially in a good enough financial position in order to be able to fund this, right? Whereas now, the more people I talk to, including you, because you mentioned it, Ivan, is having the ability to be able to resource it appropriately and have somebody dedicated and committed to that expansion is far more important, because whilst size and having cash and all that is important, but actually having somebody to own it, run it, and understand the regulations, get involved with the tax implications and all that jazz that comes with it, is number one buzzword for us now, particularly, committing to that expansion rather than just going in at a scattergun approach and all those words that you used throughout that. I think it's really important that brands understand that it's going to take time. And it's like setting up a new business, right? They need to treat it as setting up a brand new business in the region, which they would have gone through at the beginning of their journey anyway. So if they reflect on that and think, I've got to do all that again, I think it puts them in a really great place to understand what's going to cost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. And so on the flip side of this, how about brands not ready to scale? Are there any indicators that you experience at eVenturing where you would say you're just not ready yet? Whether the feasibility study, the market research might indicate that there's a good opportunity, but you just don't feel the brand is ready yet.
Yeah, I mean, I had a really good example of that the other day. I was speaking to a client, or a potential client rather, that they had been wanting to expand for a very long time, but they had a very, very niche product that, I mean, they were absolutely killing it in the US. Like, such a niche, like that's the beauty of America, is that the most niche products. And that's what I love about Amazon, is that nothing surprises you. And they were very much so wanting to expand internationally. And, we did the market research, but there's just not a lot of market depth throughout Europe, UK, over here for this product. And, we got on the call and we did the pitch with them and talked them through the results of the analysis. And we kind of said, look, like we love that you guys want to expand. However, we just don't think that the market depth is here. And they came back and they're like, well, the market depth wasn't there when the US, when we started in the US. And I was like, yeah, fair play to you. It's so fair. But also at the end of the day, we had a very honest conversation. We're like, yeah, we can absolutely do this. But, at the end of the day, we don't want somebody to launch for the sake of launching. We want them to make sure that they're going to be successful. So we really, do come in, we are kind of in a way a bolt on to their current operations, that we come into their business. So that's just an example of there not being the market depth, but Ivan, you can speak more to the kind of prerequisites and such.
I think that is the main one. Ultimately, if you're trying to sell bear spray here in the UK where we don't have bears, it's going to be very difficult to justify to a brand that they will have success here in the UK. So that's a really important one. And ultimately, I do think there is always a conversation around timelines and expectations. For example, it takes anywhere between 2 and 4 months to get certain VAT numbers within the UK and the EU. So expecting to be live and selling before that time frame is something that you need to let clients and brands know that there is an expectation. And to what you were saying, Drew, when they started their business in their home market from scratch, it didn't become into the position it was overnight. These things do take time. I think it's important that you partner with the right service providers who essentially have boots on the ground and experience in unlocking the marketplace and then also managing the growth in that marketplace.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to, as we're talking about the different offerings that we have, between vendor and growth and romantics and whatnot earlier, is that this is the one thing about being in this space, and I'm sure you guys find that as well, is that there's always an education piece with your partners. It doesn't matter, whether they are Amazon experts themselves or they're just launching in the market. There's always this education and building of trust, because a lot of people, if you've been on Amazon in the States and the US for, in there for, 10 years, that market, but then coming into the UK and EU, that's the unknown. Whereas, say those big corporates we're talking about with the distribution model, they're actually just fundamentally trying to understand how Amazon works. And so it's always about setting, the expectations from the get-go and building that trust right from the start. Because if you're trying to educate your partners while you're trying to grow them and unlock these markets, if you don't have that trust and you don't do a good job of it, the relationship's never going to work.
Absolutely.
So you're always you're kind of in this education seat at the same time, trying to, educate your partners around how the space works. So, yeah.
Sure. Thanks. So, yeah, the infrastructure piece and the resource piece, I just want to revert to that because eVenturing plug a big hole in that, right? So for businesses to support that brand who's not based locally, and often in many cases the other side of the world. So we're talking about resource and the brand's ability to be able to put not boots on the ground so much, but being able to dedicate resource their end to their expansion, and obviously eVenturing come in and support a large amount of that. But what does that look like for a brand typically in your experience, and what setup do they need to have internally to be able to give you what you need to be able to then support them in the UK and EU?
I think there's two elements to this. In order to launch into a new marketplace, typically you need a VAT number, or for example in Australia, a GST number and an Australian business number. Typically, all of these tax authorities just require up-to-date business documentations to prove that the business is legitimate. Proofs of identification and verification documents for any beneficial owners of the business over 25%. So whether that's a founder of a business or an administrator within the business that is readily available to provide those pieces of documentation, that is the main pieces for obtaining VAT numbers and Australian business numbers, for example, to go live. So a dedicated resource to hand over business information and also directors' information. And then from a marketing perspective, this is where we almost see an overlap with some of the brands we work with. Naturally, if you've grown to become a really successful brand in your home market, you've probably got someone internally that is working on the brand's marketing, both from an Amazon pay-per-click perspective, but also wider Shopify and brand building. eVenturing plugs in here where it comes down to the localization. Typically, we don't want to portray the brand's messaging and brand's identity different to what they're doing in their home marketplace. So we'll leverage the portfolio managers we have, which are spread across the UK, Europe, New Zealand, to ensure that
when that would come up.
It's my office now.
To essentially ensure that the localization of the content is all done correctly. And then
speaking to the Amazon's algorithm, but the customer intent at the same time. That's really, and again, it's an education piece. Is that a lot of brands go, we're going to change our brand. We're like, no, we're just trying to put it into the context of the local market. And that's what our in-house branding team does so well, is actually just taking your branding tone of voice and turn that into that kind of localization side of it.
Something that particular countries can get on board with, right?
Yeah, the question you ask in terms of infrastructure and resources is always a difficult one, because some businesses operate well and are very dynamic and lean in nature. Solo entrepreneur that has built the business from his back garden and is very hesitant to take on other members of staff. Equally, larger brands which are already operating in multiple marketplaces and recognize that they need experts around them. So they might have a finance department, a marketing and branding department, a PPC agency just for the US alone, a supply chain manager because they're operating in multiple markets, both in retail and within Amazon. There is no right or wrong answer here. I think it's, if you're planning on expanding internationally, unless you have a very good understanding of the product compliance requirements and VAT requirements, then you're going to need to outsource that to experts in order to not only have a physical footprint in the marketplace from a responsible person's perspective, but also from a fiscal representative perspective as well. Quite often you can't be in multiple countries at one time, so you are going to have to outsource some of this when you expand internationally.
But yeah,
Sure.
Either ends of those two different kind of clients, those have been, the 2-man, 3-man bands to the right to the big corporates, is that, we can plug into any sort of that in terms of we are chameleons and we've seen it all. So, whatever people need, we can adapt to, and we've got the skill set to kind of execute.
Do you see any difference between those owner managed businesses where they're right at the coalface and those that are of a size where maybe the owner's taken a step back and subsequently letting his team manage it? Do you see any difference in either the levels of communication or commitment either side of that? Because I think they are the two typical extremes, aren't they? You're going to get one with a large portfolio of staff who are dedicated in each individual vertical, or you're going to have somebody who's wants to keep hold of their brand and been super successful, and no reason why they shouldn't expand internationally. Fair play to them for that, but then wanting to keep it all close knit. I'm interested to hear on that.
Yeah, I mean, you deal with it more on a day-to-day, but it is like we say to our partners that, some partners go, they go, well, where do I fit into this now that we sign on? Like, we're partnering, like, what do I do now? And we go, well, we have partners that either want to go lie on a beach and we never hear from them for the next, where they check in like 3 times a year, or otherwise we have partners who want to talk to us 3 times a week, and either way we adapt to that, and we're happy to be in that full spectrum. But I mean, you can probably talk more to that.
Yeah, so I think ultimately, regardless of size, it comes down to how many decision makers are within the business and how many levels of or layers of approval are there for decisions to be made. So I think what's very important from mine and April's perspective during a pitch with a potential brand is laying down the timelines and KPIs for how quickly do they want to launch into one of these marketplaces. And if they want to launch quickly and efficiently, then from our side it's okay, we're going to need sign off and approval and frequent communication with you guys, especially during the first 3 to 4 months, as ultimately we both eVenturing and Expandy can control a lot of things up until the point of application submission, and then it's you're having to wait for the various tax authorities to actually review the application and approve it, and that's one thing we don't have control over. So I think it's depending on the size of the business, how frequent is the communication. Sometimes it can be really good in a larger brand because they have a dedicated e-commerce manager whose only role is managing the e-commerce part of the business. So you've almost got a dedicated resource that you're talking with daily. Flip side of that is you could have a small business where the founder is being pulled in every direction, and it's very difficult to find time in their calendar to actually tick off the boxes that are necessary to expand.
Yeah, and also, when we talk to our partners, our model is built to be very autonomous at the end of the day. Except that, an international expansion, as I've been saying, it's like that initial uplift in terms of, getting all the documents, getting everything submitted, getting all the data requests, kind of access to everything. That's the very intensive bit. But kind of once, we're past that point, our model is very much so like, hey, if you want to be hands off, that's what we're here to do. We are now part of your business. So it is like people have to be prepared that if they want to be selling between, say they come on board now and they want to be selling in January, well, we can get everything done with you guys in the space of 10 days, few days, but you guys need to send it our way. And then from there, we're pretty much good to go. So it's just, it's a fine balance.
Yeah. Because I'm going to touch on the Accelerator Program in a minute, but before we do that, like your specific Accelerator Program, what that looks like in terms of the journey for a client. Before that, how do you pick, how do you pick which international markets are right, European markets are right for a brand? If they come to you and say, well, look, I've been recommended, I've seen the potential opportunity in Europe, I want to be in Pan-EU, I want to do a Pan-EU 8, help me out. What does that look like for you and understand where that particular product fits?
Yeah, so basically, generally that journey kind of starts with myself. So basically, as I've said before, so we for every client that comes, or potential partner that comes and talk to us, we run a free market opportunity assessment. And what that identifies is the why, what's the opportunity, the how, and then the kind of the what, how do we execute, and how do we unlock that, how do we launch and scale those partners into the markets. But basically, in terms of a research analysis perspective, what we'll do is that we will look at UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Canada, whatever international market we're looking at, and we'll look at the revenue potential by each of those markets. So what are the top 10 players doing? What's the revenue that they're doing as a whole? What's the top 10? What does number 1 look like? What does top 5 look like? What does top 10 look like? What do we think that these guys can achieve? Between how many competitors they are, how saturated the market is, also how big the markets are comparatively, and also kind of what on the bureaucratic side in terms of what does the unlock take to kind of get them live and selling there. Particularly like some brands say, who were we talking to the other day? I was talking to somebody the other day that it made a lot of sense to stay quite English speaking for the first, to kind of test the market in the UK, and then look to kind of launch into the wider EU. But then some would go, okay, your biggest opportunity is in Germany, just because of seller trends and kind of the market's big in there for some stuff. Like, for example, one thing at the moment that's quite an exciting kind of 2 categories is, or 3 categories is, 2 categories now, is food and drink, and also fashion and apparel. Those are the 2 fastest growing categories on Amazon. But there's quite nuances to those categories, and so kind of understanding that it's definitely what the revenue potential is, what is the competitor landscape, and where would your brand fit into that? How would we tackle that? Because you don't necessarily need to be number 1 from the get-go. It's just identifying what bracket of that top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20 looks like, and going, hey, how do we quietly come into a market, launch, and then start to eat into their market share and making sure we hold that market share. So that's generally the first approach to it. And then
I was adding on to, so whilst April will have an exploratory call with the brand, it's essentially a fact-finding exercise where April's core objective is to really understand the business, understand the pain points, because ultimately there is additional cost and additional complexity with launching in multiple markets than there is to launch in one market. So if financial resource is a pain point, then the recommendation would be to select the market that is not only the one best positioned for success, but also from a cost perspective, you don't have to go through multiple levels of product compliance requirements. In the EU, we have the EPR packing register, EU responsible for person fees. That's an additional cost if you want to sell in the EU as well as the UK. Australia, a different set of requirements again, which there are additional costs for, and Australia being a newer marketplace, the market demand for a lot of consumer products isn't quite there yet. So potentially it doesn't make sense to launch there.
Yeah, it's also understanding what, relationships they have with manufacturing, with the manufacturers, or where the product's manufactured, or what the lead times are. There's like so much that we need to understand in the wider business, because, our real edge on that is that, we come into a business and we are end to end. So, we really need to understand how the whole thing works. Whereas you get a lot of agencies like PPC agencies, and they might plug into like one part, but not necessarily understand the wider flow of the business, which really matters when you're trying to launch into these new markets. But so it is kind of in a roundabout way, you've got to look at the whole picture. But also, as we said, it's that structured playbook of that. You get your home market right, you add one country on top, or maybe 2, generally it's UK and Germany, and then you kind of add on those France, Italy, Spain. You kind of, once you come into one, smash it out of the park, add on another one. So, yeah.
Good stuff. And what about barriers? So when a brand comes to you, I'm quite interested in this piece. When a brand comes to you, day one, you've done the market research, you've established that there's a good opportunity for them in the UK. What then are the barriers for the brand to expand? Or what do they feel the barriers are, rather than you? Because we know the unlock piece, we know the VAT compliance and all that jazz. What are their concerns about getting ready to trade?
Just the concept of selling internationally can be quite a scary and daunting prospect. There are so many things that you need to have in order. So I think that is just a barrier in itself, not only placing trust in an agency and service providers who are going to go away and do this. Ultimately, for a lot of these founders, their business is their baby, and the idea of placing trust in an agency like ours to launch them overseas can be quite a daunting barrier in itself.
Yeah, and it's also for us, this is another thing that we always try to communicate, is that it's about making sure that when you launch into these new marketplaces, you're moving at speed to make sure that you kind of really capture that honeymoon period. So honeymoon period is, as you know, is obviously when you move into these different marketplaces, is that you can transfer your reviews. I'm going to say that wrong.
Gotcha.
Transfer your reviews over. So basically, you're operating one ASIN in one market when you can actually be operating it in 7, and the reviews transfer across. You're basically, what Amazon, what the algorithm does, is that it puts you top of shelf in that kind of prime real estate spot for the first 30 to 90 days. And that allows you to kind of take that as your market launch, being there, you need to make sure that you're capturing it. You've got everything, all your ducks lined up, the listings, the stock, everything. So when you go live, you have the advertising console set up, you make sure your listing's converting, so that when you are launching or selling, you're making the most of that prime position, which means that you're obviously getting your click-through conversion rates high and making sure that you're feeding your organic rank to kind of build and scale from there. So it's making sure that, from our perspective, once that VAT number's approved, once the stock's in the water, making sure as soon as it gets into Amazon, we are ready to go and we're maximizing that window. And so it's moving at speed. And so that's basically for us, is that making sure we're communicating that to our partners, like, guys, when we're on. So it's, maximizing that, I would say, that barrier of launch.
And then a fairly common barrier is, in their home marketplace, how do you deal with returns?
Yeah, that's true.
Storage can be expensive. There is a lot of cost associated with getting everything in place to sell in a new marketplace. Amazon, if you don't have a return address either in the same region, so somewhere in Europe for European marketplaces, or specifically in the country itself, so UK, Canada, etc., then you you essentially have to accept that any damaged stock, customer refunds or returns, you're going to have to dispose of them, or find a 3PL provider that is going to be an additional layer of cost to manage that piece. So I think that's a barrier that is quite a big one. And our recommendation there is, we work with a range of 3PL providers here in the UK and Europe, also basically across the world. My approach is always, unless you are selling into retail already in said marketplace, so you'd need to have a third-party warehouse to manage the off-Amazon sales. Go live into Amazon, and if you start selling really well, and as a byproduct of selling really well, you're getting a significant number of refunds and returns to warrant then paying for a warehousing facility, we can move quickly to get one set up and make the introductions there.
For the expertise and coming into these markets, we have the network and we have the capabilities to make sure that if there's a problem, if there's a problem, we can come up with a solution. So basically knocking down those barriers.
So now, talk to me about the Accelerator Program. So I'm a brand. I've come to you. You found that there's some elements of success there. You think that you want to work with me. What does the plan look like for me? So from day one, what do you have certain steps in it? Do you have like a pathway of success to exit or to growth, whatever that may be, whatever the outcome of the brand wants? Talk us through what they actually look like, not in granular detail, but
So are we talking you as a brand as a seller looking to expand internationally, and the Accelerator for that brand, or the Accelerator program for in-house country management, growth?
No, international brands. I'm based in the US. Been successful in the US. I want to launch in the UK. What would be next? What would be your roadmap to success?
Sure. So probably split this into 3 layers. Layer 1 is you join in week 1 and you meet the whole eVenturing team. So our branding team, our catalog and compliance team, the portfolio manager, who'll be your day-to-day operational account manager, let's say, and then myself heading up the international expansion and delivery team, dealing with the wider structural and logistical pieces of getting you set up to sell internationally. Within this first week, we'd send out a large data request, which typically would require you to submit all the pieces of documentation necessary from a product compliance perspective and VAT requirement perspective. I'd ask here that we have a very swift turnaround, no more than 2 working business days on when we send out a request, that someone within your business could get that back to my team. We would then typically work with the likes of yourself, Expandly, as eVenturing can't offer the VAT filing service, responsible person service, product compliance service. So partner with the likes of Expandly, where we get them set up on the Expandly platform. I would work with the onboarding team at Expandly to make sure that all the documentation that you're going to ask for, I already have that ahead of time. We'd submit that documentation, and ideally within the first 2 to 3 weeks of the partnership, I'm having an email from the onboarding team at Expandly to say, okay, your VAT numbers for the marketplaces you want to launch into have been submitted. And then it's a case of the waiting timelines for having that approved. Simultaneously, whilst this is all going on, I'd be then submitting the product labeling and artwork to Expandly's compliance officer, where we would then receive a compliance report, essentially laying down the foundations of what needs to change on the product packaging and product packaging and labeling to be compliant for sale in the UK and Europe. But alongside that, any supporting testing certificates that need to be either completed by the brand, or if they have already completed them, handing those over to Expandly so that you can represent these brands from a responsible person perspective on their product packaging and labeling. So any customer complaints in terms of purchasing the product in the UK and or Europe, Expandly is the point of contact for dealing with those customer complaints, essentially. So that all takes place typically within the first month of working with eVenturing. Somewhere between month 3 and month 4 is when we expect the VAT numbers to be obtained. So probably somewhere between the end of month 1 and end of month 4. That's when I have our catalog and compliance team complete all of the listing transfers from the US into the UK and Europe. Alongside that, using the portfolio managers from the various European countries to help with the localization of all their content so that it's optimized for these international marketplaces. Alongside having the day-to-day account managers set up all the Amazon advertising pay-per-click campaigns so that when stock arrives in the UK and or Europe, they're best placed to start selling from day one successfully. The only other piece I haven't really put in here is the freight forwarding side of things. So as a part of April's market analysis and then further market analysis done by the account manager, they'll build essentially an inventory forecast that allows the brand to work with their supplier to essentially calculate how much stock needs to be produced for their launch into the UK and European marketplaces. Once that number is set in stone, we can then get a good indication of how many pallets might be necessary in order to ship. And then depending on the speed of which the brand wants to start selling, we can recommend air freight forwarders and other freight forwarders to actually send the stock into these marketplaces. So I think that gives a good picture of from day one to sometime in month 4 how you can be live and selling.
You mentioned about PPC strategy and the understanding of that from month 4. So we've got the VAT number, they ship the stock. From then on, just talk us through what that program looks like for with eVenturing to then scale.
Sure. So there are so many levers for growth on the Amazon platform, everything from advertising strategies, leveraging the Amazon deal windows, SEO optimizations, frequent A/B testing of either header images, premium A+ content, all through the lens of, okay, how can we optimize the products on Amazon so that they sell at a very fast rate of knots, essentially. We also use third-party tools to help aggregate all of the costs within Amazon so that the business can get a view of what their business's P&L looks like in not just the UK, but Germany, France, Italy, Spain, taking into account the different VAT requirements in each of these marketplaces, all through the lens of, okay, how can we continue to grow this business? And usually that is iterations on any of the growth levers that I mentioned and continuously making changes to ultimately grow the business. And then also using some of the other service providers that you see at the Accelerate, so affiliate marketing, ad tech solutions.
It's all built for, it's not just scalability in terms of unlocking these markets, it's actually like profitability as well. It's like growing at a rate that, you're not just, growing for the sake of growing, but it's actually profitable at the end of the day. And like, that's really where like Ivan and his team really get stuck into actually, making sure we're using all those levers in the best way possible, and making sure they're effective across all marketplaces, and then always looking for the next one to kind of move into as well. So
nice. And how about a success story? Have you got a particular, no need to mention the brand, data protection and all that? It's hot in the UK, right? But a brand success story that you'd like to share with us that's gone from launch to scale or even exit.
Yeah, sure. So we were working with a brand that essentially sells the inside of glasses tips, both on the temple and here, have a patented technology that basically when you're playing sport, if you're sweating, you're not at risk of your glasses falling off, essentially. Only selling in the US, and within 4 to 5 months we were able to get all of their VAT numbers, tick off all the product compliance requirements, and have them selling in UK, Germany, France, Italy and Spain. And from the start of the process to 5-6 months in, they're very happy with how the partnership's going in terms of growth and also profitability as well.
Awesome. How many times a month do you see products and you think, why didn't I think of that? I do it all the time. If only I was an inventor.
I know. I'm like, I'm a good executor, but not necessarily the ideas person, that's for sure.
That's such a great idea. Why has nobody thought about this before, right?
Yeah, I do see that. But it was interesting speaking to a lot of the sellers at Accelerate. Quite a few of them, they had launched multiple products, and I think we only see the ones that have stuck and done well. Amazon as a platform has been around for a while, and there's a lot of products where ultimately they've been selling for long enough that they've built up the review base, they've built up the relationship with the supplier where they get a really good landed cost of goods sold due to the size and scale, and because they can be priced low and have high reviews, that they're always going to be successful. It's coming, like you said, coming up with new products that there isn't a legacy review base, something that people haven't thought of yet, and you're at the very beginning of a new consumer trend.
So we're rewinding a little bit here. Maybe I should have asked this earlier, but as we're on the subject of new products, in your experience, have you seen more success from a new product, or we would deem new, may not be new in another country, but that we deem new, and therefore the market is not overcrowded with it? Or do you find that there is more success or equal success maybe from a product that there's lots of, but there's just a big opportunity to sell, right?
Yeah. Oh, that depends. I mean, and this is like in our business, as we were saying before, there's lots of different offerings that we do. So if you are a product that you are wanting to launch on the platform, say you are quite a new business, and this is kind of like your first step, that is a very different growth pathway to like ones that are established and expanding or have gone to a certain point of view. But again, it's probably more in your realm of experience.
I'd say it's so difficult from the new product lens, because ultimately if I could tell you that this new product was going to be successful, I would go launch it myself.
Yeah, for sure.
Just because there's a new product and nobody else is selling it doesn't mean you're going to be successful, because ultimately there needs to be search volume and a trend of consumers thinking about that product and wanting to buy it.
Yeah, it's often equity off the platform, brand equity off the platform.
Then a lot of awareness required in that. Whereas if you've got a supplement which people are searching ashwagandha or whatever all the time, but your product has got a USP, you're going to have the opportunity to be searched far more than a new product which arguably nobody's looking for. So I think that when you come back to strategy, your strategy may turn less towards PPC or search volumes and more maybe into the marketing element of it and get some brand awareness first and then.
Yeah, well, it's interesting as we're saying before, fashion and apparel is the fastest growing category on Amazon at the moment, and so a lot of big brands like some of which we work for, they're just starting to enter the market, and so they have that brand equity, so they're coming in and they're going, hey, but then there's also like smaller brands who are seeing. I don't necessarily have the same brand equity, but we're saying to them, we're having conversations, being like, this is an up and coming category. Yeah. You have the opportunity to get on here early, establish yourself as an Amazon player on the platform, as these other kind of larger companies come in and kind of build out the revenue potential on the platform. And so it's a real fine balance on where people are sitting, but basically, if there's a new category opening up, then it's like you better there's so much opportunity to get on and get in fast and establish your market share. So, yeah.
Interesting. Awesome. Okay, cool. We're coming to a close now, but I've got two more questions for you. Cool. First one being, what piece of advice would you give to a brand or a founder of a business who's looking to take their brand overseas? Number one piece.
Find the right partners. Find the people that, you feel like you trust and can integrate well into your business and know what they're doing, which, naturally, from our perspective, we think is us. But also, I think having all the enabling conditions set up back home to make sure that when you go and execute this, you don't want to be, doing a half-hearted job. I was about to say something else just then. We can do it for you, but you've got to be in the mindset and ready to, put some backing behind it to make it happen. So that would be my piece of advice. What would yours be?
Yeah, echoing what April said, but then also go into this conversation with an open mind. I think more often than not, sellers may not be aware of the opportunity of selling globally, and that there are a lot of service providers out there that can make the entire process a lot more simpler than it's portrayed to be.
Cool. And now we're going to go on to talk of AI as our final question, because we can't possibly do a podcast without artificial intelligence being part of it now, right? It's absolutely everywhere. So in your world, how is AI automation evolving, and what's eVenturing doing, I suppose, to leverage that?
Sure. So I think, I'm not sure if it was Andy Jassy. Yeah, I think it was Andy Jassy at Accelerate. They obviously announced the one seller assistant to help with listing optimizations, but then also branding as well. We're seeing more often than not now, and especially within eVenturing as well, that historically we've very much had a dedicated branding team that can do listing optimizations, photo shoots, and are very good at what they do. However, in order to provide multiple different versions of an image for A/B testing, there was significant uplift there. Through the correct programming of various AI tools that we're using now, we can leverage the AI capabilities to generate multiple versions of the same image with slight twists on it, which can really help from an A/B testing perspective. I think the A/B testing module within Amazon is so important, and not enough brands leverage it. You want to be picking up as much data as you can on how you can improve your product's offering on the platform, and that's one way to do so.
Yeah, I think also, for us is that, we are constantly, just to, again, echo Ivan, is that, we are constantly looking for new ways to improve with AI, but I think our approach is very much so that man and machine, as AI is developing, that is still very, very, important to keep a sense check of that actual, that human approach to it, particularly, with us, one of our main service offerings is that you get that dedicated portfolio manager. Like, it is a very face-to-face, like, we are in your business working with you, but we are always kind of looking for ways to constantly improve and what tools can we be drawing on to make our offering, but also, your business better. And so I think, we are definitely always looking for new ways to improve and testing things. And also with Amazon as well, there's, it's one of the biggest corporates in the world, is that there's so much information out there that's available. But as we all know, sometimes, Chat GPT doesn't always get it right. So it's making sure that we're really keeping like a pulse on that human and that man and machine approach is really, really important. And kind of, sorting through all the stuff out there, because it can get quite overwhelming. So,
definitely within the ad tech space. So tasks that still require the keyword research and a portfolio manager, an account manager going in and making iterations within the ad console, depending on the brand is scaling for growth or scaling for profitability. But within the ad tech space, the automations that they can do, which save a lot of man hours from manually having to go into the platform and do it. I think that's a big one moving forward.
Sorry.
Awesome. No worries. Thank you both very much for coming down. It's been an absolute pleasure. See you again.
Thanks for having us.
See much more of you in the future as we continue our collaboration. So if a seller wants to get in touch, we will put both your details at the bottom of the podcast. But eVenturing, if you're interested in exploring everything we spoke about today, then get in touch with April or Ivan. I'm sure they'd be delighted to have a chat with you and give you a free market. What's your
opportunity assessment?
Opportunity assessment. There we go. Thanks again. We'll see you soon.
No worries, thanks.
Thank you.